Hello, and welcome back to season 4 of 31 Days to Wellbeing. So, this month in October, we're focusing on nutrition. So, we're looking at specifically following a blue zone diet. There are 5 in the world, and essentially, the reason these are so called blue zones is that they are regions which have pockets of people who either have some of the longest life expectancies in the world or the highest concentration of people who live to be over 100. So, to recap, the 5 that exist in the world are the Barbaria region in Sardinia. So, this is a mountainous highland region of inner Sardinia with the world's highest concentration of people who live to be over 100. Then there's Ikaria in Greece, so it's an Aegean island, I believe, off the southern coast of Greece. My geography is not good, as you can probably hear. So this is an island which has one of the world's lowest rates of middle-aged mortality and one of the lowest rates of dementia. There's the Nicoya Peninsula in Costa Rica. This has the world's lowest rate of middle-aged mortality and the second highest concentration of males who live to be over 100. Then we have the Seventh-day Adventists, which are kind of a religious group in Loma Linda in Northern California. And basically, they live 10 years longer than their average North American counterparts. And finally, we have Okinawa, which is a southern island off the coast of Japan. They have the highest concentration of females over 70 who are the longest lived population in the world. So there you go. So the 3 that we have decided to focus on are Sardinia, Okinawa, and I'm focusing on Ikaria. Now, obviously, it goes without saying there are other factors as opposed to diet that do contribute to these populations living long and healthy lives, such as climate, their pace of life, and their kind of general sense of community belonging. A lot of them practice religions or a certain faith, but because of their geographic location, a lot of them are quite isolated, so it kind of fosters that quite strong social connection in those environments with the people that are around them, because, you know, they don't have historically have had as much opportunity to meet different people. So yeah, obviously there are kind of several factors which the populations look at in terms of their diet. One of which is this practice called mindful eating. So the basic premise is that when you get to be feeling about 80% full, you should stop eating. The reason being is that kind of in that 20% gap between not feeling hungry and being completely full, that can kind of be the difference between maintaining or gaining or losing unnecessary weight. It's important to stress that, you know, we're not doing these diets to restrict ourselves, but there is science behind the idea that if you are kind of maintaining a healthy weight, whatever that looks like for yourself and whatever you're comfortable with, that, you know, does kind of contribute to living a longer and healthier life. So yeah, there are 2 other kind of key aspects of the sort of blue zone diets generally that are worth pointing out. And one is a very strong focus on a plant-based diet. So beans, lentils, pulses, all kind of cornerstones of the blue zone diet. Meat only tends to be consumed on average about 5 times a month in these regions. So it's not really a key part of the diet at all. And last but not least, a cheeky glass of wine at 5 p.m. is often consumed by people in blue zone regions, other than Loma Linda, because of their religion. But in the other regions, it's also sort of known to have long-lasting benefits in terms of, helping you live a long and happy life. But on to Ikaria. So Ikaria is a Greek island, as I said, historically being quite an underdeveloped and isolated region, which has meant they've become extremely self-sufficient in terms of food production, with very limited resources. Basically, they rely on what they can harvest seasonally all year round, and they tend to rear livestock in, as we sort of said, limited amounts and in a very organic and non-invasive way. For instance, goats are really popular for their milk and for cheese, and they will only, slaughter maybe like one goat, maybe one goat a family. Not sure on the exact quantities, but it's not much. And the point is, they sort of use the animal, nothing goes to waste. They use it sort of gradually throughout the year in small quantities for special occasions and for holidays. So yeah, in other words, a very simple seasonal diet for the Ikarians. Some staples of the diet and their health benefits I just wanted to quickly go over are olive oil. So this is a really healthy source of monosaturated fats. And kind of a key thing about Blue Zone diets is they sort of try to minimize their consumption of saturated fats, which in a lot of quote unquote Western diets can be sort of a key factor for heart issues and diabetes. So olive oil is a great source of monosaturated fat, which helps contribute to this production of what's called good HDL cholesterol, and it's really good for your heart. Another key foundation of the Ikarian diet is nuts. So particularly almonds and walnuts, which are very high in vitamin E. This helps kind of monitor your levels of lipids, which in turn help lower levels of what's called LDL, which is kind of the bad cholesterol, and so that lowering of that cholesterol sort of helps prevent your arteries from clogging and is good for your heart. So to run through like a typical day of an Ikarian diet that I was trying to follow, and I've been trying to follow for the last 12 days, is kind of as follows. So a breakfast tends to be a late morning breakfast of often a glass of goat's milk, which I have to say I have found quite difficult to source in London so far. So if anyone knows any good outlets, hit me up. Or alternatively, yogurt or cheese. Cheeses tend to be feta and goat's cheese. Herbal tea or black coffee to drink, with some whole grain bread and honey. So my variation of this has been some nice nutty granola, no chocolate unfortunately in the granola, keeping it healthy, some Greek yogurt and some honey and a herbal tea. Herbal tea I've tended to opt for a green tea and peach, but obviously go wild. Rosemary tea is also very popular in Ikaria, so if you've got some fresh rosemary sprigs in your house, chuck them in a teapot, Bob's your uncle. So moving on to lunch. Tends to be a variation of vegetables, potatoes, and or some seasonally caught fish. Again, served with a very generous serving of olive oil. This for me has tended to be either a portion of some leftover stew, which I have tended to be cooking for dinner, so I'll kind of go into that in a sec, or a visit to the salad bar at my works canteen. So some variation of potatoes, beetroot, lettuce. Has left me feeling quite hungry throughout the rest of the day, I won't lie, but I guess that's part of the diet. So yeah, then on to dinner, which as I said, for me has tended to be what's called Ikarian longevity stew. It's a really nice aubergine, cannellini bean and feta stew, which I tend to have been sort of batch cooking throughout the week. So I'll make like 3 or 4 portions worth, have it for dinner, have it for a couple of lunches at work in the office, and then have it for another dinner. But usually, yeah, a dinner for a typical Ikarian would be quite light. So some bread, some olives, vegetables, and of course, a lovely glass of red wine. But yeah, I have to confess, throughout the last 12 days, there have been some meals where I may have slipped a little bit, but I do have what I think is a valid excuse in that I have just moved house. And I don't have a desk at my current flat, so I've been in the office 5 days a week for the last 3 weeks. So there have been times when some of the meal prep has perhaps slightly fallen to the wayside, but I think that's important to highlight on the podcast because obviously we don't have the luxury of living in these beautiful idyllic island settings. We live in London and have full-time jobs. So sometimes it's about, bringing these practices into your diet and daily life in a feasible way. But yeah, so each week for the next couple of weeks, Mr. Tarpey and Mr. Beckett are going to be each taking it in turns to run you through Okinawa and Sardinia. And then for our final episode of the month, we're going to do sort of a big roundup of how we've all found it. And yeah, we'll be posting some more stuff on our socials about the recipes. So please keep your eyes peeled for that. But otherwise, hope you have a great rest of your week and see you soon. Bye for now.